The Premier League may have returned this past weekend, but the transfer window is still up and running, which means there can be so much change between now and the 1st of September. In this video, we're going to be looking at the five transfers the Premier League needs to see before the window closes. At number five, this one hurts me to say, it's Alexander Isak to Liverpool. I get that this would be arguably the biggest transfer of the summer, arguably maybe even the biggest transfer in the last couple of years. But it's just gotten to be such an ugly situation with the way Isak is going about trying to get out of Newcastle. He's claiming promises were made. Newcastle are saying such promises were never made. It's just all getting really horrible and just sad. And it feels like it's going to disrupt the season of Newcastle all all year if they keep him around. Maybe it will still linger even if he were to move on and then Newcastle were to struggle without him, because don't get me wrong, he is without doubt their best player. And selling him to Liverpool, like selling him is bad. Selling him to a Premier League rival would just be a ginormous step back on the journey for Newcastle, because you look at the top teams around, you look at the likes of your Chelseas, your Manchester Cities, your Liverpools, they don't sell their best players to their rivals. That is just not something you do. That's not the way to get ahead. That's just not the way to get ahead. And unfortunately, this is what ends up being the fate that falls on Newcastle. It would just be a real step back on their journey, and that, like, who knows how far that could set them back in their ambitions to become a regular Premier League and Champions League contender. But I think if their options are sell him now or keep him unhappy for the year and then sell him for less next summer, I think it makes the most sense to sell him now. If they truly believe there is a way back for Alexander Isak, there is a way to reintegrate him to the starting 11 and to the fan base, then by all means keep a hold of him, because he is a super talented player and they are very, very unlikely to find a better player out there, even with the cash haul they would receive for his services. So if they believe in their heart of hearts that there is something that can be this is something that can still be rectified, then by all means, I think they should keep a hold of him. But if they only see what gets the world is seeing right now and just the darkness and the negativity, then I think they should cash in. They're gonna get big money from one of the highest transfer fees we're ever likely to see. I think it would definitely smash a Premier League record if they were to sell him. And if that's the way it has to be, that's the way it has to be. It would be devastating as a Newcastle fan, and for me as a Manchester United fan, to see Liverpool going out and getting an elite striker after already signing the likes of Florian Wirtz, Hugo Ekitike this summer. Yeah, that'll be really tough. But this is at the five spot just because it's not pretty. It's not really how anyone would have liked it to go, and I just think my hope and in my heart is that he can be rectified at Newcastle and he could go on there and be the leader that takes them up to heights that they've never reached before. That's still what I hope it happens, but realistically, he's probably on the way out. And realistically, he's probably going to Liverpool. So Newcastle, make sure you get every last penny you can out of that club if you are going to sell him. Then at number four, one that could happen should Isak be sold by Newcastle, and that's the signing of Nicholas Jackson. This could be still a wild card. Nicholas Jackson is an enigma. He still hasn't really broken out yet. He's 24 years old. Should Newcastle be looking at a player that Chelsea don't deem good enough for their team and who they replaced with a player that Newcastle are also targeted earlier in the summer in Joe Pedro? Maybe not. But there's something about Jackson that just makes you believe that he could maybe still be a top Premier League striker. Maybe not quite the same as Isak, but a guy that can get you 15 plus goals a year, a guy that's going to be able to handle the physicality of the Premier League, a guy that's going to give his all for the shirt. I think that's exactly what Nicholas Jackson could do, and maybe he could be a good fit in Newcastle. Maybe there's a little bit less pressure, even though they're going to be in the Champions League and trying to compete at the highest level of the Premier League. But I think he'd really like buy into being a Newcastle player, buy into the fans. I think the fans would soak him up, and I think he would reciprocate the love they have for him with his performances on the pitch. And I think it could end up being a match made in heaven. I'm not sure I'm totally sold on him, but he has proven that he can score in the Premier League. 24 goals in 64 appearances so far, which is a solid return. Not anything spectacular, but for a guy who's only just turned 24, I think that I don't think there's anything to be balked at. He has got quality. He's just trying to find that consistency and just calming down a little bit. Obviously has a tendency to get a few yellow cards and a few red cards, and hopefully that'll he can grow out of that. But he does have talent. He does have Premier League experience. The only thing that I think should really be deterring Newcastle at this moment is the price tag that Chelsea reportedly want. They are being rumored to be asking for £80 million for Nicholas Jackson. I don't think that's something that Newcastle should be doing. I think if they paid that much money, that might turn into a mistake. But if they were able to strike a deal closer to maybe £50 million, 10 millions in add-ons, something around that marker, I think this could be a risk worth taking for them. They've obviously been in for the likes of Sesko and Buemo, Joe Pedro this summer, being rebuffed. Ekatike as well. They've been rebuffed in all their advances. Maybe this could be their chance to go and steal a player that reportedly Aston Villa really want as their top target to in the final weeks of the window. Maybe they can go and stiff arm Aston Villa and take Nicholas Jackson out to Newcastle, because Newcastle's arguably a better project. Yeah, it obviously looks a bit ugly with the way things are going with Alexander Isak right now, but this is a team that have been in the Champions League 2 of the last 3 years. This is a team that are looking to grow. This is a team that are a really exciting project. And after winning their first trophy this year, like this past year, it feels like this is the moment to join a Newcastle side and be part of an amazing journey where it could be like almost easy, obviously a strong word to become a club legend and a Premier League legend joining Newcastle at this time. This feels like it could be a good move for both sides. I think it's obviously completely dependent on whether or not Newcastle decide to sell Alexander Isak. And I also think Newcastle have also been in for Jan Wissa. Brentford obviously trying to play hardball after selling a good few of their players this year, and especially after Mbuemo. So they've had a recent bid worth a total package of £40 million rejected. I think if they could find a way to add both Jackson and Wissa, they're going to need two strikers. They have no obvious striker at the moment with Isak out and Callum Wilson gone. So I think they need to bring in two strikers, and I think Wissa and Jackson as a duo, yeah, maybe not the dream targets that they wanted to get, but they could prove to be pretty good backup plans, and they could dovetail well and help Newcastle transition away from relying so heavily on Alexander Isak. Would be a risk, but for the right price, I think a risk worth taking for the Geordies. At number three, we've got Savinho to Spurs. Now, obviously, it's been a rough week for Spurs. They were in talks for Eberechi Esse, and unfortunately, Arsenal came in and stole him from right under their nose, and they have now agreed a deal in principle to sign Eze, and that's just really tough. And this, unfortunately, it feels like the same old for Tottenham. Levy is just too strict when it comes to negotiations, and unfortunately, when other teams are in, the Spurs usually get outbid or outmaneuvered in the transfer market, and that's really tough. But I think Savinho could be a very interesting backup plan to Eze. Eze is obviously the more complete package, the guy we've seen more of in the Premier League over the last few years. Obviously, been an England international as well. Very talented player, clear, creative outlet. And then Savinho is a little bit more of a question mark. Obviously, didn't nail down that right wing position last season with Manchester City in his first year there. But as a 20-year-old, should we really have expected him to do it? Let's not forget, this is a player who managed 9 goals and 10 assists in La Liga as a teenager. Big money move to Manchester City last summer. Still managed to put up 8 assists in just 21 starts in the Premier League. For context, that's more than Kevin De Bruyne, James Maddison, and Brian Mbuemo. There is a player there. There is a talent there. I think on City's side of things, I think it'd be too soon maybe to give up on the player. I also think it'd be too soon for Savinho to maybe be considering the what would be a step down to Spurs, but going and playing in that stadium, going into a Spurs team that hopefully are reinvigorated with a new head coach, he could go in there and be a star. He could really light it up for Spurs. A little bit less pressure on him, a little bit of a step down, as I said, but I think he's got a lot of talent. This is still a team that are going to be playing Champions League football next year. This is still a team that, at least on paper, are striving to compete with the very best in the Premier League. So I think Savinho could go in there and really emerge as a superstar. He could take these 2, 3, 4 years to really develop at Spurs and become that elite player. And then maybe if Spurs are failing to establish themselves as a perennial Premier League contender and a perennial Champions League squad, then he could maybe make a move back to one of the bigger boys that are really challenging for the biggest titles. He's still so young, only 21 years old. So I think it'd be a smart move for Spurs. I think if they can strike a right deal here, I think it'd be great because they definitely need creative players within their team. Obviously, Madison's out for the year. They've lost Son. They've missed out on the likes of Gibbs White and Eze. Kulusevski, I'm still the injury timeline for him is still unclear. He obviously had knee surgery back in May. I don't think they ever revealed how significant of a surgery that was and when he is due to be back. That could be in the next few weeks. That could be October. Could be November. It hasn't really been made clear so far. So I think they're really crying out for some creative players. And Kudus obviously showed his value in the opening day victory over Burnley with 2 assists. I think Savinho can come in and be a star. He can nail down that right hand side. I think you could Kudus can play off the left easily, and I think you have that trio of Kudus, Solanke, and Savinho as your front three at Spurs, and I think that could really produce a lot of goals and turn Spurs into a really fun team to watch. Savinho is still a player that I think a lot of us, including myself, maybe underestimated him last year. Maybe we're too judgmental of his first year at City, forgetting his age and forgetting the struggle that City had, the transition year that it turned out to be for this Manchester City squad. So I think it's going to be tough for them to get this deal done. I don't think City are enamored with the idea of selling Savinho, but I think if Spurs are willing to pay, I don't think there's anyone else that's in for Savinho. So, and apparently he's open to the idea of joining them. So if Spurs are willing to pay, maybe they can get this deal done. But the willingness to pay the big money is always a question mark when it comes to Daniel Levy. So maybe just take this thought with a pinch of salt, maybe out there. At number two, we've got two players for one position at Manchester United. Obviously, they've really heavily invested in their forward line this summer, bringing in Cunha and Buemo and Sheshko. That's cost them a lot of money, but they still need more improvements. And midfield is a position, the number six position specifically, that it feels like they really need to fill. They don't have that player that's capable of playing alongside Bruno Fernandes. I don't think you want to rely on Casemiro for a full season. I don't think Ugarte has got the quality to be able to be relied on either. They obviously have been linked with Carlos Baleba. Um, as much as it's been like shut down and apparently the other reporting is that this deal is a no-go and United have moved away from negotiations and maybe they'll go back next summer and try to buy him because Brighton reportedly do not want to sell this year and are have resigned themselves to the thought of selling him next summer. But I feel like there could still be a move to be made from United if they're willing to pay. Of course, it's gonna demand a huge transfer fee. He still has, I think, over 3 years left on his contract. He is one of the bright young talents in the Premier League. They just sold, I guess, a similar player in Moises Caicedo for 115 million pounds just a couple of years ago to Chelsea. So why shouldn't they ask for a similar price for Baliba? He'd be exactly what Manchester United need. They're desperate to fill that position, so they absolutely should dig in and ask for this huge price. Athletic, good on the ball, has all the qualities United have been missing in their midfield in terms of this number six position over the last few years. Only 21 years old, so he could come in and he could be a United player for the next 10, 12 years and really become a legend at the club. It's just a question of the price tag. Are United in a position where they can pay it? There's obviously question marks about how much money they have to spend with when it comes to PSR and little things like that. But I think this is a position that United need. Believe it. As much as it's been shut down, there's still a little part of me, a little something in the back of my brain that says there still could be a move to be made for Manchester United. The way they've been so aggressive this summer, the way they've sternly negotiated with teams to get deals done, the way that they've only really gone for their number one options, which is something I really like. This is a team in United who have struggled to get their number one options over the last few years and ended up with the second or third option, and that has ultimately still paid big money, but hasn't worked out in any real positive way. So I think keep an eye on this on the Baliba situation. This might not be dead in the water, despite the reports that we are hearing, because I think this is a Manchester United team that want to go for their number one targets and aren't willing to accept second best. But a different option at the position, if they were priced out of a move for Carlos Baliba, is Adam Wharton. I love his game. I love how he's developed in this Crystal Palace side. And I really truly think that Adam Wharton could be Manchester United's next Michael Carrick. I think he's got that level of ability. He is good on the ball. He can protect the back line. He's good at pretty much everything. He does it all. When in terms of a number six, in terms of a midfielder, he's got solid size. He's got good lesson. He can get around the pitch, and he's very impressive as a passer. And I mean, yeah, it'd still be an expensive deal. We're talking about an England international who's also still under contract until 2029, still only 20 years old. Obviously, had like last year was a real breakout year for him, but he also showed his qualities in his previous seasons with Palace too. But I think this guy is legit, and maybe now is the time for United to look to invest when the likes of Liverpool and City and Arsenal and Chelsea maybe already are set in that position and aren't really looking. Maybe they have to take advantage of that. And while Carlos Baliba maybe is the first choice, and Adam Wharton's a slight, and Wharton is maybe a slightly different player, I still think he could fit the role perfectly and thrive within the Ruben Amorim system. So I think United shouldn't be looking at any like real like cheaper options or stop gaps in this position. I think it should be Baliba or Wharton, or if they can't make either of those deals happen, I think maybe they turn their attention to filling the goalkeeper position, which is a big problem for Manchester United. I think the midfield is arguably a bigger hole that they need to fill. So I'm not sure when it comes to the money side of things. I don't know if sales mean they can sign both a goalkeeper and a midfielder, or sales just mean they can fill one of those positions. I think if Baliba or Wharton are available, Manchester United absolutely have to make those deals happen. If they can't get either of those players in, then I think they should turn their attention to the goalkeeper position, sign a legit number one that we can actually rely on a weekly basis and won't cost us in the way we've seen Bayindir and Unana both cost us in big moments over the past season. They've obviously been linked with a couple of players like Lucien Agume from Sevilla and Morten Hodgelman from Sporting. If they believe these players are legit, then by all means pursue deals. But if these are just stopgaps or second options because they can't get the Belieber deal done, I would maybe hold off and look to reinvest in the position next year. That's just my opinion. United, I've loved how they've been aggressive and going after number one options this year. I don't want to see them regress and going back and settling for the second or third option again, because that has only failed them in the past. And then, of course, the big one, number one, has to be Rodrygo to Manchester City. This is obviously completely dependent on Savinho leaving the club, but Rodrygo has already shown to be maybe not the favorite of Xabi Alonso, a player that could potentially want to leave Real Madrid. That's been the order of reporting. It's been Real Madrid do not want to sell, but if the player says that he wants to leave, they're willing to negotiate a deal. He would likely cost upwards of 100 million. They would demand that fee from him. Still only 24 years old, still a player who has a lot of quality, who has delivered in big moments for Real Madrid. People often talk about how he sacrifices in the Real Madrid team. playing off that right wing. He's more naturally a left-sided player, and he would thrive if he was able to play off the left. But obviously, that's not really possible with the likes of Vinicius Junior and Kylian Mbappe also playing at Madrid. But at the same time, he still put up some pretty damn decent stats for a young player playing for Real Madrid. 68 goals, 51 assists in just 6 seasons at the club, winning Champions Leagues and league titles. This is a super talented player. This is a guy that could come in and fill a hole in the Manchester City team. Manchester City don't have a left wing. Jeremy Doku is not the guy for to really that's really ever going to be consistent in my opinion. Yeah, he's got flashes. Yeah, he's got some nice dribbles, some bit of skill, but I don't think he's ever going to be the guy that Manchester City can rely on a weekly basis, or a guy that will always be a name on the team sheet when they're going into big matches in the Champions League or the Premier League. So Rodrygo makes sense as if the reports are true and the talk is true that left side is where he would actually thrive, and the only reason that he's never got to play there is because of the other players within the Real Madrid team. He still obviously can deliver off the right, but a player like that, the versatility, I think Pep would love that. Still only 24 years old, and of course, buying from Real Madrid is always so risky. I really, really hate it. Manchester United have fallen victim to it over the last couple of years, signing players from Real Madrid. Real Madrid usually only let go of their players when they've got everything they could possibly get out of them and they're on the decline. That's usually the way it goes. So it's always a little bit concerning when you're taking the risk of buying a player from Real Madrid. But at 24 years old, a player that people have said it hasn't gotten to play his best position at the club, maybe he could be an exception. And it's exactly the kind of blockbuster we need coming towards the end of the window. City have been quiet. Obviously, they did a lot of their business early in order to have players going into the Club World Cup. So I think this would be just a perfect bookend to a transfer window. We get that major blockbuster deal, that superstar that comes into the Premier League, and who knows, maybe can take it by storm. Maybe he could be the difference maker when we're talking about the title race come March or April. It would be fitting. Obviously, as not being a Manchester City fan, it'd probably be pretty scary. The prospect of a guy like Rodrygo really coming in and taking over, and that just adding another piece of quality to this already stacked Manchester City lineup. But hey, it's all about the entertainment factor, and you want to see the best players playing in the Premier League. And if that's what we're all looking for, then Rodrygo, come on down, man. And remember, there's still plenty of time left for your club to make a big move. Let us know in the comments what you want to see happen. What transfers do you want to see? What players do you want to see your club getting rid of before the end of the year? I know I have a long list there, but please let me know in the comments. You like what you see, and make sure you subscribe. Make sure you come back to the Hand of Game for all of your Premier League coverage.